Start. Okay, today we are going to start with a small topic about constructor and destructor. Okay, this is a switch off topic. Today we are going to start with a new topic that is nothing but a constructor and destructor. Okay, before starting the new topic, first we get the idea about what is meant by constructor. Okay, before starting the constructor, we just write a simple program so you get the idea what is meant by constructor and why we need that constructor. So I'll just start with a small program. I'll just write down that program. Just pay attention. Okay. For timing, just consider I'm creating one particular program. Okay. For creating any program, first I require one particular class to create it. To create a class, the structure is class name. You can give any class name. For timing, I'm giving my class name as a practical one, or you can give any name. But while create a particular class name, you have to follow some rules and regulations. In class name, start with the any character, underscore, and something. Okay, so I'll give a proper meaningful class name that is nothing but a constructor name. Okay, again, opening and closing. While creating any class, you should have some entry point, and that entry point is nothing but a particular method, and that method is nothing but a public static void main. Bracket open. So while I compile this particular program and run it, depending upon my basic structure and basic idea, it will run the application. Now inside this particular class, I am having one particular main method. That method is nothing but a public static void main. Inside this particular main method, whatever logic I am going to write, depending upon that logic, it will run the application. Right? Now for time being, what is my idea? I will just create one particular application which contains two methods. First method to find out the addition, and second method to display the records. Right? So I just create a method over here. My first method is nothing but suppose accepting any number from a user. So accept data, bracket open, bracket close. My main idea is nothing but when I am going to run this application, by default this application or this particular part is going to run, and whatever logic I am going to write inside this accept data, it will run first, and again depending upon the another logic, that is the display data. First I will accept some values from the user. To accept the values from a user, first I will give a proper message to the user. To give a proper message, I just write a console.writeLine function. And inside that I just give a proper message. That message is nothing but a enter first number. After this particular message, user will wait for the particular input. That input I'll just accept using a predefined function and store in a particular member variable. That variable is nothing but using a integer format. I will store the value. So that variable name is nothing but number one, and it will store the value in a integer format. Okay. So I just write the value console dot read. When I am going to run this application, instead of running properly, I'll get one error. That error is nothing but this one. The reason behind that, by default, when I am writing this particular method readLine, console.readLine, by default it will accept that information in a string format. So whatever information I am accepting in a string format, I'll just store it inside the integer format. So it's I can say that mismatching. So to avoid that mismatching, I'll just use another way, that is nothing but a typecasting. Means by default my data present inside a string format, that data I have to convert into a integer format. To convert that integer format, I just use some predefined function, and how I will write it? Just check out. First, console.readLine. I am just writing in a short form, but consider it's a complete console.readLine. Right? Now before the read that information, whatever information it will accept, it will convert into a particular integer format. To convert that value, I'll just write the function convert to int continue. So if my program is going to start execute, it will display one particular message in that first number. After that, it will wait for a particular input to be accepted. So that input will be accepted using a console.read line. It will read the line, convert the data in an integer format and store inside the particular variable. That variable is nothing but a number. This is my first variable and I am going to accept. Now I will accept the same with the second variable. So again I will just perform the same operation. Console.write line. Again a meaningful message. That message is nothing but enter second number. The same way I will just follow in number 2 equal to the same conversion for a particular value to be accepted. Any query? After providing a proper input from the user, my another task is nothing but find out the addition. To find out the addition, I just perform the same way. That is nothing but the int total equal to number 1 plus number 2. Am I accepting the data and find out the addition is done? Now next part I have to display this particular information. Right? So to display the information, I just write the another function. That function is nothing but a public void display. Now inside this particular function I just write my logic to display the information. Now in this function it will display the data whatever I am going to. Right? Now for time being I just do one thing. Whatever the function written type, that is nothing but void, instead of void I just change into a integer. Right? And instead of a default function I just create a parameterized function. That is nothing but it will accept any one value. Now inside this function it will display some message. That is nothing but the console.write line addition is whatever the addition accepted by the particular. Okay, now my program is complete. Now I'll just do one thing. I just compile this particular application and run it. When I move to run this application, I'm not getting any single output. The reason behind that, I'm just creating my particular logic part. Okay, my particular class is there. Inside a particular class, my entry point is there. That entry point is nothing but a public static void main. But inside that entry point, I can say that any jumping part is not there. I'm writing my separate logic. But my compiler just consider it's a logic written, but it's not a calling part is there. So what I do, I just do one thing. Inside the entry point, I just call this particular function. Okay, so I just call the function. To call a particular function, you have to create the object of a particular class. I'll just create an object. To create an object, the structure is class name, object name. You can give any name equal to new whatever the class name is. And using this object, I am going to call this particular function. Okay. Again, another information: when you are writing a particular return type for a function, your function should return some value. So at the end of the function, it should return some value. That return value is nothing but the right. Now my object is created, and using this object, I am just calling this particular function. So I just pass the value c1 dot accept data. It's a case sensitive, so you have to write as it is depending upon your function name. When I'm going to call this particular function c1 dot accept data, c1 is nothing but my object name, and accept data is nothing but my function name. When I'm going to call this function, it will return me some value. That value I am going to store in a particular variable. Correct? And this value I'll pass to the another function. That function is nothing but a display data. So I'll just pass the value c1 dot display data. So I have to write a add. What is the value? So So when I'm going to run this particular application, I'll get the particular output as the first. It will create the object of a class. That object is nothing but C1. It will occupy our memory, and using this particular object, it will call that particular function. So pointer passed to the this function. Okay, it will run one by one. First, we will display the message. The message is the enter first number, and it will wait for the user input. So depending upon the user input, it will accept the value. That value should be present inside a integer format. So it will convert into a integer format, store in a number. Same for the number 2. And depending upon your number 1 and number 2, it will find out the total and return that total to the particular function. So again, whatever total is there, it will store inside this value. After storing this value, I am just calling the display data function, and before calling this display data function, I just pass this total data. So depending upon that, this is the total, this is the value of a particular variable. So this value stored inside a number 1, and it will display the message considered by 10. Addition is whatever the value is. Okay, this class is the created using a normal logic. Now again, inside this class, I am defining a multiple variables: number 1, number 2, total. Right? While I am creating any particular class, it contains n number of member variables. Again, when I am going to define this number 1, number 2, it doesn't contain any particular value. Value is depend upon user input. Value is depend upon user input. So what is my idea? When I am going to create an object of a particular class, automatically value should be get initialized. And to value get initialized, I am going to create a constructor. So we will get back to the main topic, and that main topic is nothing but a constructor. So we discuss what is my constructor. I just will rub this just 2 minutes. Constructor. Now we will discuss about what is by constructor. Okay, constructor is nothing but a special type of a method. Again, when we discuss about the method, a big difference between a constructor and a special method. When I am talking about a method, we have to call that particular method. But in a constructor, we are not going to call any particular method. That is the second one. It's invoke. That is a big difference between a method and constructor. Constructor is a special method, but we are not going to call that particular constructor. It's called by automatically. But when and at what circumstances? That is nothing but a when we are creating an object of a class, or I can say that an instance of a class is going to. I'm really sorry. Okay, so when a particular class object is going to be created, it will call that particular constructor. Okay, next, now why we require a constructor? As discussed earlier, whatever the member variables we are using to initialize a memory for that particular member variables, we require a constructor. So when an object is going to create, an automatically constructor is going to call, and inside that constructor, whatever the values you are assigning for particular member variables, it gets initialized. Again, second syntax is nothing but how to create a constructor. To create a constructor, a syntax is there. That syntax is nothing but a while you create a constructor, your constructor name and class name should be same. And last point, depending upon my previous program, we can call the particular functions many times, but constructor gets called only. We will write the same program with a constructor. Just pay attention, we get the idea how I will write the particular class with the constructor. Class, whatever the name, that class name is nothing but the constructor. Now, inside this particular class, suppose I want to use the 3 variables. So I just define the variables in number 1, number 2, and I can say that third variable is nothing but a float. Again, public static void main. I am not writing the complete structure, but the syntax is the public static void main. P is the small, S is the small, B is the small, M is the capital. It's a C#. That's right. Inside that, I am just writing the same logic as the previous. Now, again, to create a constructor, the structure is access specifier. Again, class. Okay. Again, this is the optional part. It's up to you. You want to give the argument with a constructor or without argument. So depending upon that, it will create the parameterized constructor. But for time being, I don't want to create a constructor with a parameter. I just want to create a default. Bracket open. Right. Now inside this constructor, whatever the variables are available, I just initialize the default value for the particular variable. So first variable is nothing but a number 1, number 1 is nothing but 20, number 2 is nothing but a 30, and total is nothing but a, you can perform a 0 or whatever. For time being, I am just writing the value as a 0. I am just defining the variable. Again, to find out the total, I again write another logic to find out the total. If I write the total equal to 20 plus 30, so no need to write a method. So my logic is wrong. That's why I am just writing the initialization of our total variable is the 0. Inside the particular function, I just write the total equal to 20 plus 30. Now, how to call a particular constructor? I just write a proper way. Access specifier is nothing but my public, and my class name is the same as my constructor. Right. Okay. Now, when this constructor is going to call, it will call inside a main function when I am going to create an object of a class. So I will just create an object of a class, constructor demo c1 equal to new constructor. Now in this step, when I am going to create an object of a class c1, so automatically this constructor will be called, it will assign a value for number 1, number 2 and 4. Now another question, in the previous program I am not having a particular constructor, but again my program is running properly. The reason behind that, every time just remember, when we are creating one particular class with constructor or without constructor, it doesn't make any proper information. For example, if I am creating a constructor, if inside my program, if constructor is present, it will call that constructor, and suppose in my particular class, if constructor is not present, in that condition, my .NET framework call the default constructor, or I can say that create a default constructor at a backend. In the previous program, it's done by the .NET. Now, inside this particular class, I am having one particular constructor, so it will get a call. So, user C1, it automatically will call, it will assign the value for number 1, number 2, and now the same logic. Again, I am going to create two functions to accept the data. So that depending upon, you want to accept the value from number 1 and number 2, or you want to find out the value for the. Okay, I think it's enough for today.